The asteroid tumbled slowly past the viewing port, its surface glittering with valuable minerals that would soon feed the hungry factories of Earth. David Chen wiped grease from his hands and watched the rock drift by, thinking about how quiet space could be when you worked alone. His mining station hung in the void between planets, processing chunks of space debris into useful materials. Most days, nothing interesting happened at all. Today was different. A shadow fell across the viewing port, blocking out the distant stars. David looked up from his equipment and froze. Something massive moved outside his station, something that should not exist in the cold vacuum of space. The shadow shifted, and David saw scales that caught starlight like mirrors, each one the size of a dinner plate. Wings stretched wider than his entire station, and eyes like burning emeralds stared directly at him through the reinforced glass. Dragons, real dragons, floating in space without protection, as if the vacuum meant nothing to them. David had heard stories about the Drachnos, the crystal dragons that lived somewhere in the outer rim of the galaxy. Most people thought they were myths, tales told by drunk spacers in distant ports. Yet here they were, a whole herd of them drifting around his station like curious fish around a reef. The largest dragon moved closer to the viewing port. Its scales were not the bright silver of the others, but a deep bronze color marked with scars from countless years. When it opened its mouth, David expected to see fire. Instead, words formed directly in his mind, speaking in a voice like distant thunder. "Human, we need your help." David stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a toolbox. The dragon's mental voice continued, patient but urgent. "I am Thornscale, eldest of this herd. We have traveled far to find you, young builder." "Me?" David managed to speak aloud, though he felt foolish talking to empty air. "Why me? I'm just a maintenance engineer." "Because you are human," Thornscale replied. "Your kind thinks differently than others. We have asked the wise Centauri. We have begged the ancient Vorthon Empire. None could help us. Our world dies, and with it our people." Through the viewing port, David could see the other dragons more clearly now. Their scales, which should have blazed with inner light, flickered weakly like dying flames. Some of the smaller dragons could barely keep their wings spread, struggling to maintain their position in space. Whatever was wrong with them, it was serious. "What kind of help do you need?" David asked. Thornscale's massive head turned slightly, and David felt a wave of desperate hope mixed with ancient pride. "Our crystal cores are poisoned. The heartstones that give us life and let us travel between stars grow dark. We have perhaps days before the youngest of us lose the ability to fly. Weeks before we all perish." David pressed his face to the viewing port, studying the dragons more carefully. Now that he looked for it, he could see the problem. The natural crystals that grew along their spines and wing joints were clouded. Their usual clear brilliance turned muddy and dim. For a species that lived on crystal energy, this would be like slow starvation. "Have you brought samples?" David asked. "I'll need to examine the affected crystals to understand what's happening." The surprise in Thornscale's mental voice was clear. "You would study our sacred stones? Most beings fear to even approach them." "I'm a mineral engineer," David said simply. "Crystals are crystals, whether they grow in asteroids or on dragons. If something is poisoning them, maybe I can figure out what it is." A smaller dragon, its scales a pale blue, swam through space toward the station's airlock. It carried something carefully in its claws, a chunk of crystal about the size of David's fist. The stone pulsed with sick, uneven light, like a heart with an irregular beat. "Be warned, human," Thornscale said as David prepared to collect the sample. "Many have tried to heal our cores. The crystal masters of Altair Prime declared it impossible. The bioengineers of the Helix Nebula gave up after months of study. The quantum theorists of New Geneva said our condition defied all known laws of physics." David sealed the crystal sample in a containment field and carried it to his analysis station. The equipment was designed for examining asteroid samples, but crystals were crystals. As he began his scans, he noticed something the others might have missed. The corruption wasn't random. It followed specific patterns like ripples spreading through the crystal matrix. "Thornscale," David called out, his excitement growing as the data flowed across his screens. "This isn't a poison or a disease. It's a resonance cascade. Something is making your crystals vibrate at exactly the wrong frequency, breaking down their internal structure." "What does this mean?" the dragon asked. David grinned, already seeing possibilities that the advanced civilizations had missed. They had been looking for complex solutions to what might be a simple problem. It means I might be able to help you after all. But I'll need to test something first. He pulled out a sonic resonator, a tool he used to break apart stubborn asteroid chunks. If he could find the right frequency, the same principle that shattered rocks might be able to restore the dragon's crystals. David adjusted the settings, focusing a narrow beam of sound waves at the sample. The clouded crystal began to clear. Within minutes, the sick, pulsing light steadied into a healthy, brilliant glow. The sample looked exactly like the bright scales David had seen on healthy dragons in old pictures. Outside the viewing port, Thornscale's scales suddenly blazed brighter than they had in months. The dragon's mental voice carried amazement and hope. Impossible. How did you do in minutes what others could not do in years? David looked at the restored crystal sample, then out at the herd of sick dragons floating around his station. Sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones. The other civilizations tried to fix your crystals with advanced technology. I just used a mining tool. Will this cure our people? Thornscale asked. This is just the beginning, David said, his mind already racing with plans. To heal your entire world, we'll need to scale this up a lot. I'll need to see your home planet and understand how your crystal networks function. You would come with us to Drachnos? David looked around his small, cramped station, then back at the magnificent dragons waiting outside. For the first time in months, he felt truly excited about something. Pack me an extra oxygen tank. Looks like I'm taking a trip. The crystal pod felt strange around David's body, like being wrapped in hardened starlight. Thornscale had grown it specially for the journey, shaping the transparent walls to protect David from the vacuum of space while allowing him to see the wonder unfolding outside. The dragon herd moved through hyperspace like a school of luminous fish, their scales creating trails of silver light against the twisted colors of folded space. David checked his portable resonator for the 100th time during the journey. The device looked crude compared to the elegant crystal formations surrounding him, cobbled together from mining equipment and spare parts. Yet it had worked on the sample. The question now was whether his simple solution could handle the massive scale of an entire world. We approached Drachnos. Thornscale's voice echoed in David's mind as the herd began to slow. Space unfolded around them, revealing a sight that took David's breath away. Drachnos hung before them like a jewel, its surface covered in crystal cities that caught and reflected the light of 3 small suns. Massive crystal formations jutted from the planet's surface, some reaching so high they touched the edge of space. Aurora streams danced between floating crystal platforms where dragons made their homes. But even from a distance, David could see the sickness spreading across the world. Many of the crystal spires were dark, their light faded to nothing. Entire sections of floating cities had fallen to the planet's surface, leaving gaps in the sky like missing teeth. The aurora streams flickered weakly, struggling to maintain their brilliant dance. It's beautiful, David whispered, then added more quietly, and it's dying. The pod descended through Drachnos' atmosphere, passing between crystal towers that hummed with failing energy. Dragons of all sizes filled the sky around them, but their usual grace was gone. Many struggled to stay airborne, their wings beating frantically to compensate for crystals that no longer provided enough lift. Young dragons barely larger than earth birds clung to their parents' backs because they could no longer fly on their own. Thornscale guided David's pod to a landing platform near the planet's core region. Here the crystal formations grew so thick they formed a natural cathedral of gleaming stone. At the center stood the core chamber, a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with the heartbeat of the world itself. David stepped from his pod, breathing the sweet thin air of Drachnos through his rebreather mask. The gravity was lighter than Earth's, making each step feel like a small bounce. Around him dozens of dragons had gathered to witness the arrival of the human who claimed he could heal their world. Welcome to the heart of our civilization, Thornscale said, gesturing with one wing toward the core chamber. For 10,000 years, this crystal network has powered our world and given us the strength to fly between stars. Now look at it. David approached the core chamber and immediately understood the scope of the problem. The crystal was enormous, easily 100 meters tall, with veins of energy that once must have blazed like captured lightning. Now those veins flickered weakly, their light corrupted by the same resonance cascade he had seen in the sample. But this wasn't just one crystal. It was a network of thousands, all connected, all poisoned by the wrong frequency. Your analysis was correct. Human, said another dragon, this one with scales like polished silver. But see the scale of what must be healed. How can your small device restore something so vast? David walked around the base of the core chamber, his portable scanner detecting the resonance patterns that flowed through the crystal network. The corruption followed predictable paths, spreading from crystal to crystal like ripples in a pond. His small resonator had worked on a single sample, but to heal something this size, he would need to understand how the dragons themselves interacted with their crystals. How do you normally maintain these crystals? David asked. We do not maintain them, Thornscale replied, confusion in his mental voice. They are part of us as we are part of them. Crystal singers can shape new growth, but the core energies flow as they will. David nodded, beginning to understand. The dragons had lived in harmony with their crystals for so long that they had never needed to actively repair them. When the resonance cascade started, they had no tools or techniques to fight it. They could only watch as their world slowly died. I need to speak with your crystal singers, David said, and I'll need access to your mineral processing facilities. We're going to have to build something bigger than my resonator. A young dragon with bright green scales spoke up, her voice carrying both hope and doubt. The great minds of a dozen civilizations have tried to heal our cores. What makes you think your primitive equipment can succeed where they failed? David smiled, remembering something his engineering professor had once told him. Sometimes being primitive is an advantage. Advanced civilizations tend to look for advanced solutions. They assume that because your crystals are sophisticated, the solution must be sophisticated too. But what if it's not? He pulled out his portable resonator and aimed it at a small formation near the core chamber. The device hummed to life, sending focused sound waves into the corrupted crystal. Within seconds, the clouded stone began to clear, its natural brilliance returning. The gathered dragons gasped, their scales brightening with excitement. Several of the crystal singers moved closer, their eyes wide with amazement. Your device is indeed simple, Thornscale observed, yet it works where others failed. How is this possible? Because I'm not trying to cure a disease or remove a poison, David explained. I'm just tuning your crystals back to their natural frequency, like tuning a musical instrument. The corruption isn't something that was added. It's your own crystal resonance thrown out of balance. A crystal singer with deep purple scales approached David's resonator, studying it with obvious fascination. Show us how this tuning works, human. If we can understand your method, perhaps we can help you scale it to save our world. David began to explain the principles of resonance frequency, using terms and analogies that the dragons could understand. As he talked, he realized something interesting was happening. The dragons weren't just listening, they were beginning to think about their crystals in a completely new way. For the first time since arriving on Drachnos, David felt truly hopeful. The solution was possible. It would take work and creativity, and the combined efforts of both species. But they could save this beautiful world and its magnificent people. The real challenge was just beginning. The crystal workshop buzzed with activity as David worked alongside Vela, the purple-scaled crystal singer who had become his closest collaborator. 3 days had passed since his arrival on Drachnos, and the workspace around them looked like a collision between dragon technology and human engineering. Smooth, organic crystal formations stood next to boxy metal devices salvaged from David's mining station. The harmonic amplifier needs to resonate at exactly 847.3 cycles, David explained, adjusting a series of metallic tubes connected to a crystalline matrix. If we're off by even a few cycles, the cascade effect could make the corruption worse instead of better. Vela hummed a complex melody, her voice causing nearby crystals to glow and reshape themselves into the configuration David had described. Your mathematics are strange but effective, David Chen. We have always shaped crystals through song and emotion. You use numbers and vibrations. Both approaches work with the same physical laws, David replied, watching in fascination as Vela's voice literally molded the crystal matrix. You just express them differently. Around them, other dragons observed the unusual partnership with growing interest. News of the humans' methods had spread throughout the crystal cities, and delegations arrived daily to witness the collaboration. Some remained skeptical, especially the older dragons who had lived through previous failed attempts to heal their world. The Scale Council wishes to speak with you, Thornscale announced, entering the workshop with his usual dignified bearing. Elder Brightclaw has questions about your progress. David wiped crystal dust from his hands and followed Thornscale through the winding passages of the core chamber complex. The Scale Council met in a vast circular chamber where 12 ancient dragons perched on crystal platforms, their combined age spanning thousands of years. At their center sat Elder Brightclaw, her scales so old they had turned nearly white with age. Human. Elder Brightclaw's mental voice carried the weight of centuries. You have been among us for 3 days. Our crystals continue to fail. Young ones fall from the sky each hour, unable to maintain flight. When will your solution restore our world? David felt the pressure of a dozen dragon gazes focused on him. He had known this moment would come, the point where hope began to turn into impatience. Elder, we've made significant progress understanding the resonance patterns, but scaling up the solution requires precision. If we rush the process and make a mistake, we could damage the core network beyond repair. The wise Zentauri promised us precision, another council member said, his bronze scales flickering with frustration. The Vorthan engineers spoke of careful analysis. Yet our world dies while promises are made. I'm not making promises, David replied firmly. I'm showing you results. Yesterday we successfully cleared the corruption from an entire crystal grove. Today we'll test the amplified resonator on a major node. This is progress, not just planning. Elder Brightclaw studied David with eyes like ancient amber. Show us this progress, human. Demonstrate that your simple methods can succeed where advanced civilizations failed. The council followed David and Vela to a testing site, where they had constructed their first large-scale resonator. The device looked like a hybrid creature born from two different technologies, crystalline amplifiers grown by dragon song merged with human engineering components that hummed with mechanical precision. The target is Crystal Node 7, Vela explained to the council, her voice carrying both excitement and nervousness. It feeds power to 3 floating cities and supports the flight paths of over 1,000 dragons. If we can clear its corruption, we'll restore function to an entire region. David checked his instruments one final time. Node 7 loomed before them, a crystal formation the size of a building, its internal light clouded by the spreading cascade corruption. If this test failed, he might not get another chance to prove his methods. Initiating resonance sequence, David announced, activating the hybrid device. The resonator came to life with a sound unlike anything heard on Drachnos before, part mechanical hum, part crystal song. The frequency waves spread outward from the device, penetrating deep into Node 7's corrupted matrix. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the crystal began to clear. The corruption retreated like darkness before dawn, revealing the brilliant inner light that had been hidden for months. Node 7 blazed with renewed energy, its healing resonance spreading to nearby crystals throughout the region. Above them, dragons who had been struggling to fly suddenly found their strength returning. Young dragons took to the air with joyful cries, their scales glowing bright with health. The Scale Council watched in amazement as an entire section of the crystal network returned to life. Floating cities that had been dark began to glow again. Aurora streams danced between the platforms with renewed vigor. Impossible, whispered one of the council members. How did you succeed where others failed? Because I didn't try to fight the cascade, David explained, his excitement evident in his voice. I joined it. Instead of opposing the resonance pattern, I tuned it back to harmony. The corruption isn't an enemy to defeat. It's just your own crystal song singing the wrong notes. Elder Brightclaw's ancient features showed something David hadn't expected to see. Hope. Can this method heal our core chamber? Can it restore our entire world? David looked at the massive core chamber in the distance, its corruption still spreading despite their local success. We'll need to build a much larger resonator, one that can reach every crystal in your network simultaneously. And we'll need crystal singers working in harmony with the mechanical components to fine-tune the frequency across such a vast scale. How long? Thornscale asked. With enough help from your people? Maybe a week to build the equipment. Then we attempt to heal your entire world in one coordinated effort. David paused, considering the magnitude of what he was proposing. But if we fail, if the resonance goes wrong on that scale, it could destroy your crystal network completely. The Scale Council exchanged glances, communicating in rapid bursts of mental energy that David couldn't follow. Finally, Elder Brightclaw spoke for them all. Human David Chen, your methods are strange and your tools crude by our standards. Yet you have accomplished in days what others could not do in months. We grant you full access to our resources and the cooperation of every crystal singer on Drachnos. Save our world. And know that dragons have long memories for both debts and friendship. As David looked around at the clearing crystals and the dragons whose scales now blazed with returning health, he realized he was no longer just an engineer trying to solve a technical problem. He had become part of something larger, a bridge between two very different ways of understanding the universe. The real work was just beginning, but for the first time since arriving on Drachnos, David believed they might actually succeed. The construction site sprawled across the crystal plains like a bizarre fusion of two civilizations. Dragon crystal singers worked alongside human engineering principles, growing organic amplifiers that merged seamlessly with David's mechanical components. The device taking shape was unlike anything either species had built before. Part machine, part living crystal, designed to heal an entire world with a single, perfectly tuned note. David hadn't slept properly in 2 days, surviving on stimulant tablets and the excited energy that came from solving complex problems. Around him, dozens of dragons worked tirelessly, their songs shaping crystal formations according to his specifications, while their natural abilities compensated for limitations in his equipment. The tertiary harmonic matrix is complete, Vela announced, her purple scales dusty from crystal work. But David, I'm concerned about the power requirements. To reach every crystal on Drachnos simultaneously, we'll need more energy than the core chamber can provide in its current state. David rubbed his tired eyes and studied the energy calculations again. Vela was right. They were caught in a circular problem. They needed the core chamber's full power to heal the core chamber itself. It was like trying to lift yourself by pulling on your own shoelaces. What if we don't try to reach everything at once? David mused, thinking aloud. What if we create a cascade effect in reverse? Start with the outer networks and work our way inward, each healed section providing more power for the next phase. A deep rumble drew their attention to the sky, where a massive dragon approached the construction site. David had never seen this particular dragon before. Their scales were black as space itself, shot through with veins of silver that pulsed like starlight. When they landed, the ground trembled under their weight. I am Voidwing, the enormous dragon announced, their mental voice carrying authority that made even Thornscale seem small. I have watched your progress from the outer reaches of our system. Your methods intrigue me, human, but they also concern me. David felt a chill that had nothing to do with Drachnos' cool air. What concerns you, Voidwing? You propose to alter the fundamental resonance of our entire world, Voidwing replied, their silver-veined scales rippling with energy. What if your calculations are wrong? What if this cascade you create cannot be stopped? You could destroy our civilization in attempting to save it. The construction site fell silent as other dragons gathered to hear this exchange. David realized that Voidwing was voicing the fears that many dragons had been too polite to express directly. The risks were real and the consequences of failure catastrophic. You're right to be concerned, David admitted. This is the largest resonance engineering project ever attempted. But look around you. He gestured to the crystal plains stretching toward the horizon, where whole sections remained dark and lifeless. Your world is already being destroyed. The cascade corruption spreads faster each day. Without intervention, you have weeks before total crystal network failure. The Centauri said the same thing. Voidwing countered. They convinced us to try their quantum stabilizers. The experiment destroyed 3 crystal cities and made the corruption worse. Because they tried to stop the cascade instead of redirecting it, David explained patiently. I'm not fighting your crystal's natural resonance. I'm tuning it back to harmony. To demonstrate, David activated a small resonator aimed at a corrupted crystal nearby. The device hummed to life and the crystal began to clear, its natural light returning as the wrong frequency was corrected. But Voidwing remained unconvinced. A small crystal is not a world, human. Scale changes everything. Thornscale stepped forward, his bronze scales glowing with determination. Voidwing speaks wisdom, but we cannot let fear paralyze us. I have watched this human work. His methods are simple, but they work. Where others failed because they overthought the problem, he succeeds because he understands the fundamental nature of crystal resonance. And if he's wrong, Voidwing demanded, if this planet-scale resonance destroys the core chamber completely, then we die slightly faster than we're already dying. Bela said quietly, but her words carried clearly across the construction site. At least we die trying something new instead of just waiting for the end. David felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. An entire civilization hung in the balance, and they were asking him to stake their survival on engineering principles and equipment cobbled together from mining tools. "I need to show you something," David said finally. He led the assembled dragons to a viewing platform overlooking the core chamber, where the massive crystal network continued its slow death spiral. "Watch the corruption patterns. Really watch them." The dragons focused their attention on the failing crystal matrix, observing the way darkness spread through the network in predictable waves. David pointed out the mathematical precision of the cascade failure, how it followed exact frequency relationships. "This isn't random," David explained. "It's following the same harmonic laws that your crystal singers use to shape new formations. The corruption is just your own crystal song, amplified and reflected back at the wrong frequency. All we're doing is tuning it back to the right pitch." Voidwing studied the patterns for a long moment, their ancient mind processing what David had shown them. "You see harmony where we see chaos," the great dragon said slowly. "Perhaps that is why others failed. They tried to impose order from outside. You work with the existing patterns." "Exactly," David said, feeling a surge of hope. "We're not creating something new. We're restoring something that already exists." The massive dragon looked at the hybrid resonator device, then back at David. "If you attempt this healing and succeed, you will have saved our world. If you fail, you will have ended it. That is a heavy burden for any being to carry." "Yes, it is," David agreed, "but it's not a burden I'm carrying alone. Every dragon working on this project shares the risk and the responsibility. We're in this together." Voidwing was quiet for a long moment, their starlight scales pulsing with thought. Finally they spoke. "Very well, human David Chen. You have shown wisdom in your methods and courage in your commitment. Voidwing pledges assistance to your world-healing project, but I will remain here to monitor every step. If your cascade begins to run out of control, I will personally destroy your device to protect what remains of our world." David nodded solemnly. "I wouldn't expect anything less. Thank you for your honesty and for your help." As Voidwing took position near the resonator device, David realized that the final phase of the project was about to begin. They had built the tools, gathered the support, and faced the doubts. Now came the moment of truth, the attempt to heal an entire world with a single, perfectly tuned song. The real test was just hours away. Dawn came early to Drachnos with 3 small suns painting the crystal landscape in shades of gold and silver. David stood at the control center of their massive resonator device, watching as hundreds of dragons took their positions around the crystal network. Each crystal singer had been assigned specific harmonic frequencies to maintain during the healing process, turning the entire operation into a planet-wide orchestra. "All stations report ready," Bela announced, her purple scales shimmering with nervous energy. "The outer ring crystals are synchronized. Primary harmonic stabilizers are in position. Core chamber monitoring systems are active." David checked his instruments one final time. The hybrid device hummed with barely contained power. Its crystalline components grown by dragon song merged perfectly with his mechanical engineering. Banks of harmonic amplifiers stretched across the crystal planes, each one tuned to resonate with specific sections of the planetary network. "Remember," David spoke into the communication crystal that would carry his words to every dragon on Drachnos. "We start with the outermost crystals and work our way inward. Each healed section will provide more power for the next phase. The entire process should take about 6 hours. If anything goes wrong, Voidwing has authority to shut down the operation immediately." The massive black dragons stood near the primary controls, their starlight scales crackling with protective energy. "I am ready to act if necessary, human. May your calculations prove correct." Elder Brightclaw's ancient voice reached David through the crystal network. "On behalf of all dragons, we place our trust in your wisdom and skill, David Chen. Begin when ready." David took a deep breath and placed his hand on the activation control. Around him, the fate of an entire world hung in the balance. If he was wrong about the resonance patterns, if his understanding of crystal harmonics was flawed, millions of dragons would die within hours. But if he was right, initiating outer ring resonance sequence, David announced. The first phase began with a sound like distant music, barely audible but felt in the bones. The outermost crystal formations around Drachnos began to respond, their corrupted matrices slowly clearing as the correct frequencies washed over them. David watched his monitors as the healing effect spread from crystal to crystal, following the network pathways exactly as he had calculated. Outer ring showing positive response, Vela reported, excitement creeping into her voice. Corruption levels dropping across all monitored sectors. No cascade instability detected. Phase 2 began an hour later, with the resonator device focusing deeper into the planetary network. The crystal cities floating in Drachnos' atmosphere began to glow brighter as their power sources healed. Dragons who had been grounded for weeks spread their wings and took to the air, their scales blazing with returned health. But David kept his attention focused on the core chamber, where the real challenge waited. The massive central crystal that powered their entire civilization remained clouded with corruption, its failure threatening to undo all their progress. Core chamber resonance cascade beginning, David announced as they entered the final phase. All crystal singers, prepare for maximum harmonic output. The sound that rose from Drachnos was unlike anything ever heard on the planet. Hundreds of dragon voices joined in perfect harmony with David's mechanical resonators, creating a song that reached deep into the heart of the world itself. The core chamber began to respond, its corrupted matrices fighting against the healing frequencies. Harmonic feedback building in Sector 7, Vela called out, alarm in her voice. The corruption is resisting the resonance pattern. David's instruments showed what was happening. The core chamber's massive size meant the healing process was taking longer than expected, and the corrupted frequencies were actually fighting back, trying to maintain their destructive pattern. All singers, focus on fundamental frequency 347.8, David commanded. We need to overpower the feedback loop before it destabilizes the entire process. The dragon voices rose higher, their combined song creating harmonics that shook the very foundations of the crystal cities. The core chamber pulsed with conflicting energies as healing and corruption battled for control of the planetary network. Voidwing moved closer to the shutdown controls, their massive form tense with readiness. David Chen, the feedback is approaching critical levels. If this continues, the cascade could destroy the entire crystal matrix. David felt sweat beating on his forehead despite Drachnos' cool air. The mathematics were clear. They needed more power to break through the corruption's resistance. But pushing harder risked exactly the kind of catastrophic failure Voidwing feared. Then inspiration struck. Vela, can you create a counter-harmonic? David called out. Instead of fighting the corruption directly, we need to cancel it out. Create a frequency that's exactly opposite to the corrupted pattern. Vela's eyes widened with understanding. A harmonic null space. Yes, but it will require perfect precision from every singer on the planet. Then let's give them something to follow, David said, rapidly adjusting his resonator to generate the counter-frequency. All crystal singers match the new harmonic pattern. We're going to erase the corruption instead of overpowering it. The change was immediate and dramatic. Instead of fighting against the corrupted frequencies, the healing song now absorbed them, canceling out the destructive patterns and leaving only the natural crystal resonance behind. The core chamber's massive matrix began to clear section by section, its internal light growing brighter with each passing moment. It's working, Thornscale's triumphant voice echoed through the crystal network. The core chamber is healing. David watched his monitors as the corruption disappeared from the planetary network, replaced by the healthy glow of properly tuned crystals. All across Drachnos, crystal cities blazed with renewed light. Dragons filled the sky, their scales brilliant with health and joy. The aurora streams danced between the floating platforms with colors more vibrant than they had been in years. Core chamber healing complete, Vela announced, her voice breaking with emotion. All network systems showing optimal function. The cascade corruption has been eliminated. David slumped against his control console, exhaustion finally catching up with him. They had done it. Against all odds, using simple tools and basic principles, they had saved an entire world. Voidwing approached, their starlight scales now glowing with something that might have been respect. You have exceeded all expectations, human David Chen. Your methods were indeed simple, but their effectiveness was profound. You have given our people back their future. As dragons celebrated throughout the crystal cities, David realized that something more important than just healing had occurred. Two very different species had learned to work together, combining their unique strengths to solve a problem neither could have handled alone. The real magic wasn't in the crystals or the resonators, it was in the collaboration itself. 6 months after the Great Healing, David stood once again at the viewing port of a space station, but this one was very different from his old mining platform. The Joint Human-Dragon Research Facility orbited a neutral star system, its architecture a stunning blend of crystal formations and metal frameworks. Through the transparent walls he could see dragons and humans working side by side, their collaboration producing innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. "The Altair Prime delegation has accepted our proposal," announced Dr. Sarah Kim, David's former supervisor who now headed the Human Engineering Division. "They want to establish a sister facility in their system. It seems word of our hybrid technology has spread throughout the galaxy." David nodded, but his attention was focused on the main laboratory where Vela worked with a team of human acoustics engineers. They were developing new applications for resonance technology, not just for healing crystals, but for improving manufacturing processes, creating stronger materials, and even enhancing interstellar communication systems. The irony is remarkable. Thornscale's familiar mental voice reached David as the great dragon approached through the station's crystal-lined corridors. "For millennia, we dragons were considered the masters of crystal technology. Now the galaxy seeks us out not for our ancient wisdom, but for our partnership with human innovation." "Maybe that's the real lesson," David replied. "No single species has all the answers. The Zentauri failed to heal your world because they only tried Zentauri solutions. The Vorthon Empire failed because they only used Vorthon methods. We succeeded because we combined completely different approaches." Through the station's communication systems, reports flowed in from across the galaxy. Human dragon engineering teams were solving problems on dozens of worlds, stabilizing unstable stars using harmonic technology, clearing space debris with precisely tuned resonance fields, and even helping other species develop new forms of energy production. "The Helix Nebula colonies want our help with their terraforming project," reported Commander Jensen, the station's human administrator. "Their atmospheric processors keep failing, but they think our harmonic stabilization techniques might solve the problem." David looked at the assignment roster displayed on the main screens. Every day brought new requests for assistance, new challenges that required the unique combination of human adaptability and dragon crystal mastery. What had started as a desperate rescue mission had evolved into something much larger. "Voidwing sends word from the Outer Rim," Thornscale announced, his bronze scales flickering with amusement. "They have encountered a species of silicon-based creatures whose planet is threatened by quantum instabilities. The creatures asked specifically for the Harmony Makers. Apparently, our reputation has spread even to regions we've never visited." David smiled at the title. Harmony Makers, it was better than being known as the guy who fixed broken crystals with mining equipment. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. The main display showed Elder Brightclaw, her ancient scales now gleaming with health, speaking from the crystal cities of Drachnos. "David Chen." The Elder Dragon's voice carried warmth and gratitude across the light years. "The youngest generation of our people have begun incorporating human mathematical principles into their crystal singing education. They create formations we never thought possible, blending chaos theory with harmonic resonance to achieve new levels of beauty and functionality." The camera view shifted to show young dragons working alongside human children in the crystal gardens of Drachnos. The youngsters of both species seemed to naturally understand concepts that had taken their elders months to grasp, creating hybrid technologies with an ease that suggested this collaboration was just the beginning of something revolutionary. "The universe is changing," Vela observed, joining David at the viewing port. Her purple scales had developed new patterns over the months, influenced by her constant work with human acoustic principles. "Not just because of our technology, but because of our perspective. We're teaching other species that there are always new ways to approach old problems." David thought about his old mining station, now converted into a memorial and training facility, where young engineers learned the principles that had saved Drachnos. The simple resonator that had started everything was displayed there, a reminder that the most profound solutions often came from the most unexpected sources. "David," Sarah called from her workstation, "we just received a fascinating signal from the galactic core." There's something out there sending harmonic patterns across multiple star systems. The structure is too complex to be natural, but it's unlike anything any known species produces. David felt the familiar excitement that came with encountering a new puzzle. How complex are we talking about? Complexity level suggests a civilization that thinks in terms of galaxy-wide engineering projects, Sarah replied. They might be trying to communicate using harmonic resonance across interstellar distances. Thornscale's mental presence brightened with interest. A species that speaks in the language of harmony itself. This could be the contact we've all hoped for, beings who truly understand the deeper mathematics of the universe. David looked around at the bustling research station, at the humans and dragons working together to push the boundaries of what was possible. 6 months ago, he had been a lonely mining engineer fixing broken equipment in the void. Now he was part of something that was changing the galaxy itself. Prepare a response team, David said, already planning the mission in his head. If there's a species out there that communicates through galactic-scale harmonics, we need to learn their language, and we need to be ready to teach them ours. As the research station continued its orbit, David reflected on how a simple request for help had transformed into an ongoing partnership that was reshaping galactic civilization. The dragons had asked a human for help, never imagining that the solution would come not from advanced technology or ancient wisdom, but from the willingness to try something completely different. The universe was vast and full of challenges, but David no longer faced them alone. Somewhere in the cosmos, a new form of intelligence was calling across the stars, and humanity and dragonkind would answer together, bringing their harmony-making skills to whatever wonders awaited in the galactic core. The adventure was just beginning,